Hello, and welcome to a project demonstration for DotCot. DotCot is an application to help investors and startups connect, and it lets investors build and share custom forms so that they can collect specific information from specific startups seeking funding and then search through those startups for exactly what they want. This was a project that I worked on with a team of really competent developers. We worked with a senior developer from DoorDash who acted as our project manager, and I worked with 10 student engineers in an agile environment using Scrum methodology to deliver this product to a real-world investor. This is a real-world project that is a real MVP that a company is actually going to use in the future. So it was a lot of fun, and it was a great learning opportunity, both from a technical standpoint and from a standpoint of learning how to develop with a team in this environment. So what I want to do quickly is talk about the technology that we used, and I want to run through demonstrating how this application works from both the investor and the startup standpoint. So what is the tech that we use to build this? We use MongoDB Express React Node, which is known as the MERN stack. We use styled components to make it all look good. We use Mongoose as an object data modeler, which wraps MongoDB and manages the data via a REST API. We use Passport to handle social authentication and session persistence. We use Formic to validate the forms on the front end. We use Mocha to create for testing our API utilizing Supertest as an assertion library. We use GitHub Actions for continuous integration and deployment. And finally, we used Heroku to actually host the application altogether. So that's a quick rundown of things. I'll come back and talk about those things as we go, but let's jump into the application and see how it all works. So here we are on the landing page, and you'll see the information that I just communicated at the beginning of this. You may have read it right there. We don't want irrelevant startups in our inbox. So here's some good information on how this works from both the investor and the startup standpoint. But if we don't want to read, we can also watch this video, and that will pop up in a nice modal right there. We can also click out to exit that if we want, because we've gone through the product. We know how it works. But once you kind of learn how everything works, you can come down here to actually create your form. And this form will allow us to sample and see what the results will look like once a startup actually comes through and fills out our form. So me, as an investor, I can choose what I actually care about seeing. And if I want to learn more about what each of these parameters is, I can hover over this question mark, and a nice little tooltip will pop up to tell me about what we're actually measuring. I'm curious about all these things. I want to see all these things from the startup standpoint. So I want to create that. Say I want to actually see more forms. What I can do is hover over this to see some more information about this. And I can contact the developers to get a custom form input built in. That's one of the cool things about this project is given that it's an MVP, it's still growing. And one of the ways that it will grow is allowing startups to build custom form parameters. So if, say you want to learn about, how many people are actually in the company, you can have that be another input that we can build. And then you'll be able to see that on your form and then see it rendered to a card down here. So that's enough from here. Let's finish creating the form. And when we do this, this is going to store this data in local storage so that we can return to that data once we finally authenticate and create an account. Right here, we're using Passport.js as an authentication flow, and that's really helpful for us. We didn't have to roll our own authentication process. We can just use Passport.js, which allows us to use social networks right out of the box to authenticate users. So I'm going to sign up with Google, and once I had to Google verify my account, come back, we just created a post request and created a new investor profile. And what that investor profile has is an array of those form inputs that we chose on the first page, as well as some information from our social network. And then finally, the end of this link is going to be stored along with our investor document as well. And that KOHTRD is a unique ID that was created to identify this investor amongst the world of investors that will be using this application. So every investor has a unique ID that they can attach to the end of their form and share with investors so that when investors come in and post their information, it's posting to the right investor. So here we are on the profile page. When we sign up successfully, we're brought here, and we can do a couple of things here. If we're done with this, we can delete our profile, and we don't just delete it right away by clicking that delete button. We have to type in yes. This is the second take of this video, and the first take I accidentally deleted my profile, so I'm not going to type in anything. I want to exit that because I don't want to delete my profile right now. I want to keep going. What else I can do is I can copy this link right here, so I can post that to, say, Twitter, and then share it with investors that I know on Twitter, or I can just send it to somebody directly in a message. If I don't want to go through all that steps, I can just share directly to Facebook by clicking this, and that will take me to Facebook, or LinkedIn right here, and that will take me to LinkedIn. So this is a nice way to share the link with investors from right here. If I click on Edit Form, I can come back here, and we see that same thing that we saw on the front page, where I can continue editing the form to add or remove more parameters that I want. I don't want to edit this. I want to see all these things, and I have a sample form filled out containing all these parameters, so I don't want to mess anything up. But if I wanted to, I could change these parameters right here, and again, it would be reflected right there. So save these if I want, and then I can sign out if I want, and that will log us out. But there's still a few things that I want to show you in this side of things on the investor side. When I finally send that link to startups, they're going to see something like this. In fact, I'll just go to the profile and hit the link. they'll see this. And this is an empty form, which we'll come back and edit or fill out in a second. Once a startup fills out a form, they will be stored alongside our investor in a startups card. And then any startup that has our unique investor ID attached to it will show up in our investor feed. And that's where we'll be able to filter through those things. So when I click on this, we'll be taken to our main home, where this is where we'll be able to see startups once they actually submit the form. Since I just created my account, nobody has submitted a form, but why don't we go ahead and do that right now? So once we do that, this page will now render as a list of startup cards that we can filter through. So here we are. Let's click this link, and then we'll head over there, and you can see that I already started filling this out. Now, this is where startups come in to fill out the form. When you send them the link, they're taken here, and they can update their custom information. On this side, we use Formic for some pretty robust custom form validation, and we'll see that throughout the process here. I didn't want to fill out all these things, and I didn't want to find YouTube videos, so I filled it out part ways, but we can see some of the validation. Say if I go through and try to select a logo that isn't a PNG or a JPEG, we're going to get an error right here that we need to select a JPEG or PNG under 2 megabytes. So I'll go back and shows what I did before. This is the name of the startup right there, a description that is pretty short. The URL for the website link, the video pitch that will render using React Player as a video in line. We can select our PDF, and if the PDF has a really long name, we're going to wrap that text around the end so that we can see like a nice little ... that will not create this button or won't make this button really big. Here's the founder name. There's my email. If I enter something that isn't an email and then I select away from that input, we're going to see please enter a valid email. That's a nice email validation from Formic. Here's my Facebook address. It's nothing real special. I'll just do facebook.com for now. And I'm going to leave the LinkedIn empty, and we'll see why that is. Hopefully what will show up is that on the card, we're not going to see the LinkedIn button next to the investor name. We'll just see a Facebook button. So if the LinkedIn button is left, or if the LinkedIn input is left empty, we're not going to see that. But this is where we would lead to the startup page on Facebook if you wanted to. So here are the custom inputs that the investor wants to see from me, and I'm going to enter the revenue in thousands. So I'll hit 200 because our revenue at this point yearly is $200,000. The industry that I'm a part of is AR and VR, and I'm located in the United States and Canada. The growth speed, I have about 100 new users per month, so we'll select that. We have Google reCAPTCHA going on to verify that I'm not a robot and I agree to the terms and conditions. Let's go ahead and send the form. Hopefully this all works. Bam, there it does. We're sent to a nice confirmation page. Jacob McCambly will see your application in their feed. If they'd like your startup, they'll get in contact with you. That's awesome. Now I'm Jake McCambly as well, so I'm going to go to my investor feed and see what's going on. When I update that, we finally see this new card and some now filter queries that we can see to filter through all the startups once they finally do update things. So here's what a card looks like. It has that the information in the logo that we put up before. It's the day that things were posted. And I can download the startup deck right here, that PDF that was submitted. I can go to the Facebook page. We see that there's no LinkedIn button right there. The revenue has been transformed into a currency amount. The industry location and new users per month are all right there. Now, I want to show you how these filter parameters work, but it really wouldn't make too much sense since I just have one. But what we can show is that if I put the slider input up all the way, I don't think, well, where are we? So how about this? Because this is going to filter out this startup card. And hopefully this won't show up. So if I filter that, there are no startups that match this input because I filtered out the currency. But what I want to do now is clear those so that I finally see things, and that's going to update what we see. If I have a couple of parameters here, and I don't want those to go away, but I do want to see all the startups that have submitted things, I can go to other, and that will show all the startups alongside things right here. So this is a quick overview of everything that's going on here on the front end of the website. That was the investor flow and the startup flow. It's hopefully a nice overview on how this application works. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. My personal role, I worked with the design of the front end, and I did a lot of the back end work creating routes with Express. I also did a lot of the unit testing and CI/CD stuff to keep this application running and keep the developer flow pretty smooth. So thanks for taking the time to check out this demonstration of DotCot. This was a great experience working with a team of really competent developers. It was a great learning experience for me, and I had a lot of fun building this project, and I'm thrilled that you took the time to check this out. Peace.